Welcome to Sunday Strength. Hope everybody's doing well with their Sunday. So I read this book recently that was called The Gap in the Gain, and it's by um, Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, I believe. And so, first of all, the book is really good. So if you haven't got a chance to pick that up, go ahead and check that out. It's made for high achievers, so it's a high achiever's guide to happiness, confidence, and success. But the ideas in there are useful to you and your marriage. And so I want to give you the nuggets out of there that would be super useful. So first, let me start out by explaining the gap to you so that you understand that. So the gap is the difference between the idea of where you should be, where somebody else should be, where you want your marriage to be, and where you're at now. All right. So, whatever your ideas are in your mind, the ideas that you have about yourself, somebody else, some other situation, or your situation, versus where you are, that difference in between that scenario, that's the gap. Right. And so, if you think about it, what happens is our challenges, and when I'm working with people who are experiencing hard things like anxiety, depression, um, any really any kind of label that we want to put or diagnosis that we want to put, the gap is the primary concern. I mean, we're we're not where we want to be, and the idea of where we want to be is way far out there, and where we are, that in between area there creates a struggle. Okay, so in your marriage, you accidentally do the same thing. You create a gap scenario, and I'm going to talk to you about how we can switch it over. But let me explain that to you, how it happens in your marriage. So in your marriage, you think that your partner should be doing X, Y, and Z, or you have this idea of who your partner should be or where they should be in their life. You have an idea of where you should be or what you should be doing. Sometimes it'll be in phrases like, this is who I should be with, or this is what I should be experiencing. All of that creates this idea of where you are not, but where you would want to be, right? Or in your marriage specifically, you might think like, we should be communicating more, or we should somehow um, be getting along better, or whatever those scenarios are. And I'm going to answer the question that's coming to your mind in a second. But first, just let's understand what the gap is in the marriage. And so, where you're at right now may not be any of those places that you have in your mind that makes you think like, hey, we should be in that place. Okay. So, that creates the gap, and that lends to your suffering and your not being happy and your hardship inside of your marriage. And you may be terming it a different way. You might be saying like, no, my partner is the one who creates that. Well, that is exactly what the gap is, because your partner isn't where they need to be or where you want them to be or doing what you want them to do. Okay. And so what happens whenever we get into the gap? Well, our happiness decreases, our confidence starts lacking. We really start thinking like, is this even doable? Can I do this marriage? Is this marriage for me? Did I step into the wrong thing? Did I choose the wrong person? We start asking all kinds of questions that ultimately mean the doom for the marriage, right? So that gap grows your possibility of getting distance in your relationship, disconnecting in your relationship, and not being in the place that you actually want to be in whenever you first decided that you were going to get married. Okay. And so now you might be of the belief, once all of that has happened, that, man, I might not be good at marriages. I might not be marriage material. My partner might not ever be able to be good in marriage. We're going to need to leave this scenario. And that starts flooding your mind and allows you to find different scenarios. And I think, especially in the gap, you'll find different scenarios to validate that that is true and that nothing else is possible. Okay. So the cool thing is you create the gap. Like, it's not like the gap just comes to you and it's like, I ate some gap and now I have this scenario that I can't get rid of. You created the gap. It was your focus and attention that got you to the place of not being happy in your marriage, not having confidence in your marriage, not feeling like your marriage could be successful. You created that scenario. And to me, it's such an amazing opportunity. All right. So, but then to me, the question becomes, well, how do I have my expectations in my marriage? And this is something that we always talk about. And you're welcome to go and check in on our channels to kind of review and get better at doing this. But we always talk about, it's more about what you're developing on the inside than what it is that you don't have on the outside. And I think that's useful because the question that people come to me with, and I think the question that would come up as we're talking about the gap, is how do I create a standard in my marriage? You create the standard in your marriage by the way that you do things inside of you and the way that you're approaching things in your marriage. So for instance, if you say, man, my partner doesn't hug me and kiss me very much, or they don't initiate any contact. If you stay that way and you say, look, because they don't do it, I'm not going to do it, you don't generate what's needed in the relationship. And so you have to get to a place where you've done enough work inside of your relationship to say, like, I'll always go first on that, no matter what the scenario is. Do I have a different preference? I do have a different preference. But if I stay in that preference, that's my gap area, right? Instead, if I stay in, this is what I want to create in my relationship, and I'm going to make sure I fight hard to keep doing this myself, until I don't have an option anymore, right? So you keep doing that scenario and you see how it turns out. A lot of times we're not willing to go the distance on doing the right thing. We're willing to say prematurely that the right thing just isn't going to be useful or it's not going to work. And so I think that the gain aspect comes in here, and you being able to stay in that place where you focus on doing the things that you have to do to create the relationship that you want to create is you understanding the gain idea. And so what are the gains? Well, the gains are all about the wins that you're making in life. And so sometimes we define wins based on what we've always kind of grown up with, which is a shared agreement of what wins are. But your wins may look totally different. Like just not having an argument in your relationship today could be a win, while a next relationship, they've already been on that page before. But you don't need to compare to find your wins. Just being able to have the right mindset. Nobody gets to see that, but you just knowing I have the right mindset today in my relationship, that is a gain. That's a win that you have in your life. And so can you start focusing more on those scenarios to get your focus to be in a situation that you actually want to be a part of? So like if I want to experience happiness, I'm gonna have to switch my focus over to the things that would create that. If I want confidence, I'm gonna have to switch my focus over to the things that would create that, right? If I want a successful marriage and a marriage that feels right, I'm going to have to switch my focus over to a marriage that feels like that. So you being able to do the ideas, and they go into great detail about this inside of the book, but I'll give you a couple of exercises that you can do to get focused on that and shift your mindset over. So the first thing is, in the morning time, write down 3 things that you would say, this is a gain for me. You may have seen a car accident and said, hey, that's a win for me. How would that be a win for you? Well, you might think, man, I missed that car accident. My family's with me, right? And other people might say, oh, that's not a win because somebody else is hurt. Nobody gets to determine what your wins are. And that's really important for you to be able to figure out as you go to do this practice. So 3 things in the morning time that you would say, like, if I did these 3 things, this would be wins. So now we're getting to start to focus on what we need to focus on in the morning time. And then at nighttime, they don't need to be the same, but at nighttime, you're going to say, here's 3 wins that I had during the day. So even if it's not the same, that's fine. But if you start getting this habit of building that muscle and that focus, then you give yourself a chance to look more at the gain scenarios instead of paying so much attention to the gap areas that you had. Okay. This to me is an overall fight that couples constantly have, and a struggle that they have constantly, because we often don't meet each other's expectations, or our relationship isn't meeting the expectations of the other person, or somehow it's not making us happy, right? Well, the only flip over is for us to be able to get to the part where we are able to focus more on our gains and we focus on the gap scenario. I hope this serves your relationship. I think if you start applying it today, you'll see results in a week from now. But it's just will you put that time in. All right, guys, enjoy your day. We'll talk to you soon.